everyone. Hi, so I think this is the last presentation. Okay, so I will make this hopefully worth all of your while. So I'm going to take you through, like I said, like he said, all the presentations today, everybody's doing some really amazing things out there. I'm going to take you through a different angle today, and then we're going to talk about research, the body of research, and my thoughts on it, and how the age of technology has changed it, and we need to catch up with that. So my Twitter handle is @Nupur Garg, MD. My email address is garg.nupur@gmail.com. Feel free to email me any of your thoughts. Also, I just wanted to say I have no financial disclosures, and that's it. Let's get started. So, does anybody know who this is? Feynman, yeah. So, iconic American researcher, wrote a lot about it and the beauty of research. This is a famous quote of his. About physics, because that was his field, and he says research is like sex. Sure, it may give some practical results, but that's not why we do it. I'm not making a political statement here. I'm just giving a caveat that today I am going to talk about the practical results of research, actually. And for people who are peer researchers, which I know many of you are, you might not find this presentation very uplifting, but there's another side of research, and that's the technology and the integration with the world today and the financial side, to be frank. And I'm going to talk about how there's opportunities out there with integration with technology to maybe for one of you people to have your own idea about how you can help enhance research today with the new incentives that are in place. So what is the point of research? So in the way I'm going to talk about today, research, we're going to talk about the basic, we're going to unlock the field of research, the basic formulas that we go through today. We're going to open up the book. We're going to tear it apart. We're going to change the system now. And if you take nothing home with you from my talk today, just take home this one point, that research is in a stage of transformation all over the place. People are asking for reproducibility. People are asking for new methods. There's a lack of communication between research outcomes and the people they're meant to be communicated to. So there's an age of transformation. People are asking for these things right here and right now, and you can be a part of it. I'm going to tell you how. We're going to go through the steps of academic research. There's funding, there's the actual research part of it, and then there's publishing. And we're going to talk about how each of these have incentives, the way that they were developed back in the day that still exists today. The incentive system is not aligned anymore for producing and communicating the most important results of research. So the incentives are not aligned anymore. And then we'll talk about that. I'll make that obvious to you. And then you can hopefully have some ideas of your own to go out there and realign these incentives. So back in the day, you had these forward thinkers. This is like the caveman times. And they used to do their experiments, maybe in their little stove pots over the fires. And they used to create things. And they were isolated. There was no form of communication between these people. Maybe they got somebody else who was willing to listen to their crazy ideas. And these are our original researchers. And eventually, you had many of these people, and they started to communicate a little bit, present together, have these conferences, publish things, and share them with each other. And some would argue this is the stage we're at today. We're still in these little silos, though, where we're independently working on problems that are bigger than any of us, and that other people are actually working on, maybe in different ways, but in other places. This is where I think we should be. So this represents cross-collaboration in a big way, where you might have your one method, other people might have their own methods. We're working on the same problem, and you talk to each other all the time. Unfortunately, there are some people have some misgivings about this, especially if you're in research. You might think that you'll spend all your days in meetings. Well, I'm going to argue that that may not be the case. There are some people that have proven that cross-collaboration is actually more productive than actually not doing the formal, traditional form of research. These are some examples of people that have broken the norm. So Cancer Commons, I'll just talk about really quickly. Marty Tannenbaum founded it, he looked at the state of research about his own issue, metastatic melanoma, and he just evaluated everything for himself and sort of decided that, you know, there's not enough out there for patients who have their own issues to be able to access this information. And he started this information about their diseases. And he started this NGO that crowdsources patients' information so that they can all sort of like share their own health issues, their own, especially for rare diseases. And they actually advise patients on what might be the most appropriate treatment, even if it failed in clinical trials, because for whatever reason, it works for some people, but the overall failure rate makes it a failure overall. So he started that NGO. PCARN, I'm an emergency physician, I have to give a shout out to. It's an amazing organization. There's about a dozen institutions within this, and there's huge academic research institutions that are a part of this, and the data warehouse is actually at University of Utah, and they're grant funded, and all these other academic institutions give all their data of all the research studies that they're doing to this institution. And they have the largest data set for pediatric. You can't do experiments on pediatric cases. So what you're relying on are clinical cases, clinical data that are validated data sources. So if anyone's worked with electronic healthcare records, you'll know that if you try to extract data, it's never what you think it's going to be. So it's a very robust data warehouse. They've published over 50 groundbreaking studies that have really helped emergency physicians help pediatric patient population. And the thing I just want to talk about is sort of another thing in the realm of startups, Pilot Health New York City. The way it works is you sort of get your information, you indicate an interest. They only give you funding if you found another person to collaborate with that where you have your idea, they can implement it. And then you sort of submit your joint proposal. So the whole idea that I'm trying to promote is maybe these funding sources should be linked with enhancing collaboration. Maybe these NIH grants should not be given to just one individual institution. Maybe they should be helping you find other people doing similar things through which you can learn from. And maybe the incentive system for promotion should not just be to one individual who's the lead author on things. Maybe that would enhance cross-collaboration and enhance productivity in research. So that's just funding and sort of the financial side on the researcher's side of things. Now we'll move on to the research. This is one of my favorite topics. I'm a researcher. So Feynman again. I think it's much more interesting to live not knowing than to have answers which might be wrong. Every single person in here who's a researcher knows that what you're discovering and what you're learning, how you're practicing today is going to change 10, 15 years down the line. And that's a little unfortunate. You know, the way you're talking to your patients is going to be completely different. And for better or for worse, things evolve. But there are some negative consequences. And I'm going to say that we should have higher standards for how we analyze our data, because I think the methods that we're using are still sort of in the dark ages. So this is a pulmonary embolism clot in the lungs. This is a really dangerous disease. There's a blood test that we order sometimes for low-risk patients to evaluate if they have a pulmonary embolism. It's called a D-dimer level. The theory for this blood test and being able to be a high sensitivity blood test for low-risk patients, the paper for that actually came out in 1999. And just this year, beginning of this year, February or March, I can't remember, groundbreaking journal, that when they analyzed the data for age ranges, they found that you can have different cutoff values for different age ranges and not lose any sensitivity. So what does that mean for patients who are maybe have a lot of reasons to maybe have that elevated D-dimer? Maybe it's an underlying issue, some other inflammation. And now, for 15 years, because they didn't stratify by age, simple thing to do in research, but not a common thing to do, unfortunately, we were ordering invasive studies on these patients, making them sit around in emergency departments for a really long time. And overall cost to society was enormous. The next thing Everybody's familiar with heart attacks, I'm sure. This is a little bit unfortunate, the example I'm going to give you. For many years, it was known that the elevations in certain segments of your EKG are different for different age ranges. But they're not average. They weren't it wasn't like the clinical practice norm. It wasn't the standard of care for a very long time, just because the way we're thinking about patients, the way we did research, they hadn't risk stratified in the past. Physicians weren't familiar with getting different cutoff ranges other than pediatric and adults. For all adults, there was like one norm. And just in 2011, groundbreaking, quote unquote, news published in, I can't remember, but in some, I keep up with a lot of things on the FOAM movement, which is like this open access medical education network, and Recess Me, a great blog. Groundbreaking that elevations for patients who are under 45 have to be much higher, as they're lower risk, and they also vary by age and gender and race. So all of these things, again, the way we're thinking about patients, the way we are now thinking about our patient, and the way we need to think about research is that instead of like these demographic tables where you're going through ranges, so you have your mean age, which is 54 plus or minus. When's the last time you had a patient who was 48% female, or 40, or I know that we have a lot of mixed populations, but or who had who was 54 plus or minus 8 years old. So we're doing averages too much. Your patient might look something like this. Oh, thank you. Your patient might look something like this. You want to know whether this study is an appropriate, it's the coronary CT angiography for looking at clots in your heart, is an appropriate thing for your patient who's right there in your emergency room that you need to treat. You don't want to know these averages. It might be completely not the right thing. There's another realm of this, like personalized healthcare. But I think that research, like the way that we're doing it, also needs to change to be more towards exactly, breaking it down into more specific things. And this should not be acceptable anymore in this day and age, because we have the methods. What these are? Yeah. These are medical charts. This is my image for big data. The big data obviously changes everything in the age of technology. We can use big data. We can access our electronic health records. We should be using big data. Every single patient you see as a clinician, you can think of as an experiment. I mean, it is. You're sort of trying something. You're getting information, you're sort of trying something. And I mean, they don't like to think of it as that, and I don't think you should tell them that you're thinking of it as that. But we should be utilizing all the results from all of our patients to learn more for the future. And then there's something called cloud-based networking, where if we are uploading all this information in the cloud, you have even more collaborators, et cetera, to help do. So, moving forward, this is a favorite topic in the recent past. A lot of New York Times articles about sort of like the publishers and their enormous profit margins. So the research system, like I was talking about earlier, is set up so that you are either publishing as many articles or you leave. The real saying is publish or perish, in case you didn't know it, in case you were not a researcher. So there's two issues that I have with publishing. One is that it takes way too long. The process for peer review is so incredibly long. We learn most of our results through Twitter these days than we do through published articles, which is unfortunate. The process is archaic. A lot of times you're filling out, they're sending things through paper to a lot of these peer reviewers, and it needs to evolve. And a lot of the groundbreaking studies that we need as clinicians right now, we're having to wait. and it could really alter our patients' care in a big way. So a couple things on open access. The other issue I have with publishing is that costs a lot for people who need the information. So a lot of institutions have to pay enormous amounts of money. Harvard recently signed a petition to not pay the increase in a lot of the, direct science, Springer Link type, licensing for getting all their information. And they were saying, we're just going to boycott paying all of them, all the increases, because they had enormous profit margins. Open access is a new model for that. This is a nice schematic. If you have time, if we had time, we could go through it more on just exactly where the costs go. And you'll see that if you actually paid the peer reviewers, who by the way are all volunteers, this would be their profit margin, but they don't actually get paid. This is where a lot of the different costs go. The article processing when it's print is a little bit more. When it's online only, you have a lot fewer costs to publishing. So argument here is everything should be online at the minimum. It should not be just print. And there's obviously a little bit of a margin, but it's the least. In online, it's the simplest. All right. So the next school of thought that I just want to introduce you to is that people feel if they're living in this country and they're paying their taxes, all the research that's government funded should be free for them. And I can understand that. It's actually the same. That's actually the format in Great Britain. I'm not really arguing for that. I'm just saying we put up so many barriers for physicians to get access to information. The EMR design, HIPAA in general, has caused so many problems, unforeseen language barriers that are hard to overcome. And putting price on medical education when we want our doctors to know these things is difficult for a lot of family physicians to pay all these fees to be able to access all the latest information. It's very difficult. It's seen as a very big business industry, and I think there's opportunity for restructuring. So we talked about funding, we talked about research methods, and we talked about publishing. I just want to give some acknowledgements. This is my Twitter handle if you have any thoughts. And just want to thank Stanford Medics for having me. Mount Sinai paid for most of my trip here. That's where I go to residence. And this is where I got all my images. I really appreciate that service. So thank you so much. If you have any questions.